Hey, what's up, audience? It's Controversial Quotes, aka Drone Thrust. Today, we are going to have a discussion about Donald Trump, Aaron Smith-Leven, and Sidney Sweeney. In addition, where I'm going to talk about some other topics, but the I'm using Grok AI to do a parody of Donald Trump rigging economic numbers. Um, like a few days ago, Donald Trump fired the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Um, Recently, Donald Trump has been in the news for altering the structure of the world economy with tariffs. Um, Trump did not get congressional authorization for tariffs. He used the power of his presidency to unilaterally start a trade war against Japan, Europe, and Canada. Um, the New York Times has an article that states that these tariffs are bringing in so much money that they're going to be hard to quit. Like last year, we only had $70 billion in tariff revenue. Now we have $154 billion in tariff revenue. So Trump has, something to be happy about. He's bringing in so much revenue that even the New York Times is admitting that the United States government, in when Trump gets out of office, and probably a Democrat is going to win next year. The presidency, in my opinion, always alternates between Democrats and Republicans. So let's say a Democrat like you know AOC or Bernie Sanders wins next year. Do you think that Bernie Sanders or AOC will have an easy time doing away with Trump's tariffs? I don't think they will. The tariffs are generating so much in revenue that the United States has no other means of generating that much income. And you have to realize that the deficit is over like $100,000 per person in the United States. Trump's tariffs are generating a a huge source of income, and I keep repeating myself that no Democrat will be able to um, do away with. The American economy is going to, in the future, depend on tariff revenue. And a lot of economists don't like that because they say it's a regressive tax on the poor. Yes, the economists are claiming that the poor people who shop in Walmart and Costco and people who work there, are going to end up bearing out the cost of the tariff revenue, because most things sold in those stores are imported from other countries. I've heard some economists state that the average American is going to pay $2,400 more in out-of-pocket expenses, because of these tariffs. The economists um, claim that the tariffs are a regressive tax on the poor. I think that's probably true. I believe that you know, it doesn't really bother me if I have to spend an extra $20 on a pair of Air Jordans. I mean, if I could afford a pair of Air Jordans, then I could afford to spend $20 extra for them. Um, I think that Trump is underestimating the damage he is doing with his standing with lower income Americans. And that segues to me wanting to talk about why he fired the BLS secretary. I think her name was Erica. Well, yeah, Erica McCanther. Mc, her, all right, so Erica McCanther is the BLS secretary that he fired because recently Donald Trump had a very bad jobs report. Um, One claim that Trump makes constantly makes about his tariffs is that they're going to create high-paying jobs that people like me would want to do. He's making the claim. Let me do a little show and tell. So Donald Trump is making the claim that you know when I have to spend more money for you know my camera that that's gonna result in DJI opening a camera factory to build this in America. Right? I don't think that that's true. I do not believe that Trump's tariffs are going to result in increased job creation in America because DJI will open up a factory and build cameras I like, like this one that are hard to produce and sold at a, discount. I do think that DJI might be a Chinese military front. I think that China wants to dominate the drone, sphere, and DJI drones might be a nefarious way for DJI to spy on us. But going back to the point of Secretary McCanther, yeah, Trump fired her because she reported that there was a negative job report. Uh, she gave Trump a job reports number that he didn't want. Trump has stated that he's demanded that the Federal Reserve lower interest rates. I don't believe that Trump is somebody who responds well to criticism. I think that Trump is an authoritarian that wants to prevent his critics, people like me, uh, from accessing information with which they could criticize him. I've said many times on this broadcast that I do not believe that the Trumpian tariffs will result in a manufacturing renaissance in America. I mean, Donald Trump, I don't, I think that, yes, I believe that the tariffs are going to be financed through, by payments, from the poor. And I believe that that will be his undoing. Um, Already we've seen with the negative jobs, with the poor jobs report, that Trump is worried, that his tariffs, might not be working. All right, I got to keep my train of thought. Yes. So there's a lot of chatter, like in places like the Drudge Report, that Trump is moving America towards a more authoritarian direction. There is an article in the New York Times about how Greece and Argentina attempted to do the same thing. Yes, supposedly in Greece and Argentina, there were government officials who played Enron with the economy. Uh, they claimed things were going much better than they actually were, and that led to a crash. Now, do I think that that will happen in America under Trump? Yes. I think that the Department of Bureau Labor Statistics must be tasked with giving the public objective data with regards to job creation. It's important for the public to understand if tariffs help create jobs in their community or if they destroy jobs. In addition to that, I am opposed to allowing the president to fire the BLS secretary because I believe that a liberal Democrat could play the same shenanigans. I think that if Bernie Sanders or AOC were in charge of America and received negative jobs numbers, after they, for example, like let's say they raised the minimum wage to $35 an hour. I believe that if and instituted a rent control policies across America, I believe that if you had somebody like a Bernie Sanders make a move to redistribute wealth to the poor that actually ended up hurting the economy and resulting in job destruction, I believe that someone like a Bernie Sanders or AOC could not be trusted to, you know, manage the BLS in order to let the country know about the effects of their economic engineering. That's all tariffs and high minimum wages are. They're just economic engineering. And my point is that the Department Bureau of Labor Statistics must be headed up by an objective person. Trump stated that the jobs report was rigged against him. Trump is as paranoid as Joseph Stalin, I think, for saying that. I believe that uh, that the BLS is accurate. You can't judge economic policy by one report. There are reasons why there could be large job losses in any specific report. For example, there's always corporate bankruptcies and events that cause you know like groups of 10,000 people to get laid off. um, but I do find it to be very disturbing that Trump would go so far as to get rid of a government official who reported economic data that embarrassed him. And therefore, I would like to use this broadcast in order to encourage Congress to enact a law that prevents any president from tampering with economic data. I certainly wouldn't trust the liberals to have the power of firing uh, federal government officials that contradict them. And I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I'm not coming. My criticism of Trump isn't from the extreme left. It's more from the center right. In my old age, I think I've become like a libertarian. I don't like high minimum wages, rent control, and tariffs, because I don't think that those types of programs do anything to help Americans. I don't think they create jobs. I think that if you want to create jobs in America, we should encourage high schools to teach kids the right courses and have more standardized testing. To me, I don't like the social engineering, aspect of today's liberals and conservatives. I think that we need a new libertarian, party. I've long believed that the two-party system is collapsing. I mean, it does seem to me like it's impossible to divide America, between two sides of a coin. It's more like a pizza pie. I think most Americans are politically unaffiliated and don't really have a party loyalty. I mean, I think that that's kind of like the way I am, but I'm a registered Republican and don't vote Democrats. I don't vote for Democrats because I don't believe that Democrats, fund the police department enough. I think, I didn't look at the gun violence statistics in Chicago today. I don't like to dwell on things that are very depressing, but I believe that if you were to do a Google search of the weekend Chicago gun violence, you'd probably find that at least 28, shots were fired. That shows me that, again, the problem in America isn't that we have too many cops on the streets. It's that we have too few. Um, People should, you know, fund the police department. I think that, and what the shooting in New York City showed, last week, and how Mindani flip-flopped, it is indicative of the fact that the big cities in America, I'm referring to specifically to Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago, Detroit and Baltimore, have a problem wherein they don't fund the police department enough. The police departments in those cities need three times as much funding. Again, as I say, I didn't look at the Chicago gun violence statistics before I started the telecast. I think I will now. Let's see what they are. All right, so I'm gonna look up Chicago gun violence on Google. All right, Chicago gun violence this weekend. Um, 19 shot. So yeah, as of 11 hours ago, according to ABC Chicago, it says that 19 people were shot and two fatally. It's I would blame some of that on the rise of recreational marijuana. I believe that too many Americans are high. You can't even tax marijuana enough for the damage that it does to society. Um, I was doing a Google Maps search of Chicago, and the first thing I saw was a billboard that said legalize marijuana, and I mean, I think that's why they have all those shootings. I believe that the marijuana causes people to lose their temper and become like a zombie. And it was interesting. A while back, I heard that Chicago was like making it more difficult to find. They were Somebody in Chicago wanted to make it more difficult to determine what the precise level of gun violence was. Um, Zillow and Redfin no longer show crime statistics when you look up a house. Yes, I've read that Redfin and Zillow do not report, crime statistics, because they say that to do so would be racist. That for me is ridiculous. I think that, and again, my opinion, my main thesis for this broadcast is going to be that the government must report statistics that they don't like, that embarrass the politicians. If politicians institute a policy that doesn't work, the best way for us to do away with that policy is to observe the effects through reading the statistics. When you have real estate companies that don't report crime statistics in a given neighborhood, and when you have a president that doesn't want people to know how tariffs destroy jobs, you learn quickly that America is a society that is fracturing. People don't agree with what the definition of the truth is anymore, and I find that to be very disturbing. I mean, I certainly believe you can use empirical analysis of data to determine which policies are needed, regardless of if they're popular. Um, Uh, yeah, and it's obvious that Trump's tariffs, won't bring factories to America. I think that are the companies understand that Trump is going to leave office someday, and many of the tariffs will be repealed. So it benefits corporations to just let Americans suffer through a regressive tax for as long as possible. Um, all right. So what is the next topic that I want to discuss? So in Clearwater, Florida, there is a very weird scenario. If you're new to this, Scientology, the online anti-Scientology movement has grown exponentially. Um, back in around 2004, the only place where you could get online anti-Scientology information was from like a website called Xenu and Xenu.net, and Tony Ortega has a website called the Underground Bunker that linked to his Substack. With YouTube, with the advent of YouTube and live streaming, it seems to me like the online anti-Scientology movement has reached epic proportions, but might be peaking. There was an episode in Clearwater, Florida, where growing up in Scientology, growing up in SCN, that's his YouTube handle, Aaron Smith-Leven got arrested because he basically threw a packet of powder at a Sea Org member. He, jokingly flung it at him, and the Sea Org member had he received basically a blue faced paint job, courtesy of Aaron Smith-Leven. And the problem for Aaron Smith-Leven is that he got charged with battery. It's illegal to walk up to somebody on the street that you're having an argument with and then throw blue powder at them. He was booked. He's currently getting charged with a misdemeanor. Um, I, I would argue that the YouTuber with the most followers, whom I'm not really a fan of, who started the uh, direct protest movement against Scientology, it's a YouTuber by the name of Streets LA, William Gould. I think that might be his name. He started protesting in Los Angeles, and ever since then, some of the other online anti-Scientology channels, started joining protests against Scientology as well. Now, in the past, the group that got physically attacked the most was the protesters. Aaron Smith-Leven was attacked by a madman with a dog. Some other guy attacked him. In Denver, there was an example where a Seahawk member tackled a protester who was live streaming a protest with his selfie stick. What people do is, like YouTubers like me who disapprove of Scientology, will go in front of one of their orgs in a major city with a selfie stick and live stream a YouTube protest like I'm doing now. And those protests get big viewership on YouTube. YouTube has a huge anti-Scientology community. This anti-Scientology community is dominated by personalities like ASL, Blown for Good, um, Claire and Mark Headley. You have Jessica Palmadessa. Drone Thrust has some anti-Scientology videos, but I removed them because I didn't want to get copyright striked. Yes, and so the YouTube community has been engaging in street protests at Scientology churches or buildings, and one of the leader of YouTube online anti-Scientology, I would argue, is Aaron Smith-Leven, but unfortunately, he last week definitely crossed the line and did something that I think he regrets. He took a bag of blue powder and threw it at a Seahawk member, as a joke, and now he's facing misdemeanor battery charges. He might go to jail for a year. My advice to you, if you're used to doing a selfie stick protest of any organization you don't like on YouTube, like Scientology, like particularly with regard to cults. I mean, I think that one great thing that YouTube does is expose cults. So, like for example, let's say you believe that the Jehovah Witnesses are a cult, One thing you could do is stand in front of their church with a selfie stick and, ask them why they allow, kids to die for lack of a blood transfusion. You could do this with Scientology, the Jehovah Witnesses, or maybe even like, the Royal Church of Satan in San Francisco. But I want to give you legal advice. If you do a selfie stick protest, at a religious center that you don't like, in order to live stream on YouTube for content, do not make contact with any of the parishioners there. Aaron Smith-Leven, he assaulted so, a Sea Org member with a bag of blue powder, and he got arrested and is now, he might face charges. I'm going to explain to you why I believe that Scientology might not want to bring charges against Aaron Smith-Leven. They have a habit of having a private investigator do a stakeout at his house. Yes, a private investigator who gets paid for by Scientology sits outside of Aaron Smith-Levin's house and records everything he does. Scientology has paid um, private investigators to conduct investigations of their critics. Because of the fact that if a trial happens between Aaron Smith-Levin and Scientology, Scientology might have to explain why they use private investigators to harass their critics. There was an episode where some lady from Germany was arriving at an airport in Clearwater, to investigate Scientology, and the Scientologists greeted her at the airport, and they started screaming like a maniac. I think that that video is on somebody who has a good online anti-Scientology followings YouTube. I forgot the YouTuber off the top of my head. I think he's located in Clearwater. Yes, Scientology in the past have gone after their critics. They have a legal right to do that. But I certainly do not believe that Scientology really wants to have a trial against Aaron Smith-Levin, regardless of if they can put him in jail, which I think they can. I saw the video of Aaron Smith-Levin throwing the bag of blue powder at the Sea Org member, and technically that does qualify as an assault. An assault is any time you I think I'm not sure what the legal definition of assault is, but I understand that you can be charged if you throw blue powder at somebody. Now, fortunately, the Sea Org member didn't. He's alive. The blue powder attack didn't take him out of commission. It was, in my opinion, it just looked like a harmless prank. I think Aaron Smith-Levin is somebody who um, he takes his pursuits too far, and you're pranking the Sea Org member by throwing the powder at him. Might I think he did more damage to himself than he initially thought he would. Some people on Reddit would describe Levin as an overconfident idiot. Yes, that was a comp. I don't think he's not an idiot, but yes, so a Redditor stated that ASL was an overconfident, idiot for throwing that blue powder during the protest, and I would agree that was Aaron's lowest moment. The YouTubers who do online anti-Scientology have to be careful that they don't rip the movement apart within fighting. There seems to be a big problem wherein the critics of Scientology spend more time fighting each other than they spend criticizing Scientology. So why do I personally believe that Scientology should be criticized? Well, first of all, I don't condone, I don't necessarily condone the street protests. I think they're kind of pointless and they're increasingly dangerous. But Scientology promotes a lot of false information. They promote very dangerous, misinformation and disinformation when it comes to mental health. They deny that psychiatry is effective in treating mental disorders. They claim that sitting in a sauna and taking vitamins can help purify your body of toxin inhalation, which has been rebutted many times. Their study technology that Tom Cruise promotes doesn't work. Tom Cruise has repeatedly stated that the study technology helped him get his pilot's license, but evidence would show that Tom Cruise could have received a pilot's license without the help of study technology, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not him, so I don't have direct knowledge, but it's clear to me that in the past, Tom Cruise has had made attempts to get the Department of Education to implement study technology methods in the public school system. Scientology advertises on the soup during the Super Bowl. They use parishioner donations to spend tens of millions of dollars on on glossy ads during the Super Bowl that misrepresent what Scientology is. I believe that the NFL should ban Scientology from advertising during the Super Bowl. I hope you will petition the NFL to ban all Scientology advertisements. Um, See, that's how I like to protest, Scientology. I don't necessarily believe that, shouting at them on the street corner is an effective means of doing anything. I think that that makes them even more extreme. Okay, so what else is in the news? Sydney Sweeney had a huge controversy with her American Eagle ad. Her American Eagle ad talked about how the advantage of having good genetics, and I couldn't agree with that premise more. I don't believe in eugenics. I think eugenics is a pseudoscience. But that being said, I certainly believe that genetics play an important role in how you turn out. I believe that the children of a doctor and a lawyer will probably have a higher rate of academic success than the child of two sanitation engineers. It does I've seen YouTubes wherein professional athletes state that their athletic ability was a product of their genetic makeup. Apple, unfortunately, Apple has banned genetics-based dating apps. Apple will not let a company that runs a dating app who who takes any DNA samples from their customers have a dating app on Apple. I believe that's ridiculous. And Apple doesn't like the fact that there's an industry of companies that check to see if people are genetically compatible, um, and use that as the criteria for a dating match. I think that that's a great idea. We have websites like Christian Mingle and Catholic Match that match people up based on their religion. I believe that if people want to be matched up on a dating app based on their genetics, they should be allowed to do so. Uh, um, Religion isn't really the only criteria that could link a couple together, and neither are genetics. But for people who want a genetics-based dating app, then I think that they should be able to have it. And so back to Sydney Sweeney. Yes, people are lambasting Sydney Sweeney because of the fact that her advertisement appeared to some people, it gave off the message that she wanted to breed out bad genes. Um, I'm not in favor of a policy that is aimed at, breeding out bad genes, but you know, to each his own. I had no problem with Sydney Sweeney's ad, and I believe it is No, I'm not AI generated. I mean, I had no problem with Sidney Sweeney's ad. The woke culture in America sometimes is justified, but sometimes it isn't justified. And in this example, I think you see that free Scientology from nonsense. I think that Scientology will always be connected to the nonsense that it was founded on. I believe that the critics of Scientology um, are correct. I don't think online anti-Scientology is bigoted at all. Yes, Aaron Smith-Leven should not have thrown the blue powder at the Sea Org member. Ultimately, the Sea Org member survived, and just because the Sea Org member will have to, take his suit to the dry cleaning office doesn't mean that Aaron Smith-Leven should have to go to jail for like a year. Um, One thing that you have to worry about when protesting outside of a religious organization is hate crimes laws. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me like if you protest outside of a religion and, the inevitable, fist gets thrown, you can be charged with a hate crime, and hate crimes vary from state to state. So, yes, the advice I would give to, yes, anti-Scientology protesters is do not make physical contact with the people you oppose. And you should always record everything so that the cops see what happens if they attack you. You know, yeah, I've seen I've seen some videos of protesters of Scientology getting physically attacked. So, what do I think will be the legacy of Donald Trump's presidency? Um, Donald Trump's presidency definitely has uh, had a global impact in terms of trade. It seems to me like Donald Trump used uh, the trade he used the trade war in order to extort payments from countries who are friendly to us and depend on us for defense. It seems like Trump wanted to send the Europeans the message that it was important for them to sign the trade deal in order for him to give weapons to Ukraine. Obviously, the United States of America is Europe's largest guarantor in terms of security. We've seen reports on the internet that the Russians are advancing in eastern Ukraine, and as they advance, they move their citizens into the homes of Ukrainians. What the Russians do is murder all of the Ukrainians and steal their houses. I mean, it's appalling what the Russians are doing. If we had a president like Ronald Reagan, then there would be the Russians definitely would not have advanced as far into Ukraine as they have. Donald Trump cowered before Putin. He used Putin as a tool of negotiating with the. He used Putin's aggression in order to scare the Europeans into signing favorable trade deals with us. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, but Donald Trump is not somebody who is afraid of extortion. I believe Trump has no scruples, and he's a conspiracy theorist. The BLS secretary should not have been fired. Uh, Government officials who issue reports that are scathingly critical of Trump should be rewarded, provided that the report is true, which it was with the BLS secretary. Trump, just is someone who cannot withstand criticism. I hope that in the future, Republicans elect leaders who are more willing to receive criticism. I see objecting to criticism as being a flaw, you know, we're learning with the Jeffrey Epstein case that, Trump is probably going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, in order to prevent her from, talking about him. Okay, everybody, thank you for watching this telecast. Good night.